The salt spray hit Maya's face as she stood at the edge of Beacon Point Marina, watching the pre-dawn darkness give way to the first hints of orange along the horizon. Her wetsuit clung to her shoulders, still damp from yesterday's practice session, and the familiar weight of her goggles hung around her neck like a talisman. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, its surface deceptively calm in the early morning stillness. She had been coming to this spot for 3 years now, ever since moving to Coral Bay, and the water still called to her with the same magnetic pull that had drawn her to swimming pools as a child. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But today felt different. Today, the weight of yesterday's humiliation sat heavier on her chest than the neoprene of her wetsuit. She could still hear Coach Harrison's voice echoing across the aquatic center's deck, sharp and dismissive, cutting through the chlorinated air like a blade. The memory made her jaw tighten involuntarily. The Coral Bay Aquatic Center buzzed with its usual morning energy when Maya pushed through the glass doors at exactly 5:47 a.m., the familiar scent of chlorine, mixed with the underlying dampness that seemed to permeate every surface of the building. Fluorescent lights reflected off the pool's surface, creating dancing patterns on the ceiling that she had memorized during countless early morning sessions. The lanes were already occupied by members of the elite training group, their rhythmic strokes creating a symphony of splashes and breathing that Maya knew by heart. She moved quietly along the pool deck, her bare feet silent on the textured surface. The locker rooms were still mostly empty at this hour, save for a few dedicated swimmers who shared her preference for pre-dawn training. Maya had learned to love these quiet moments before the facility filled with the chaos of regular hours. Here, in the semi-darkness of early morning, she could focus entirely on the water, on the feeling of her body moving through the liquid medium that had become her sanctuary. The pool stretched out before her in perfect lanes, each one marked by floating ropes that created orderly channels through the water. Lane 4 was her usual spot, the one closest to the wall where she could see the pace clock without turning. Her head, she had claimed it through consistent attendance rather than any official assignment. The other swimmers in the elite group barely acknowledged her presence, which suited Maya just fine. She wasn't here to make friends or engage in the competitive politics that seemed to swirl around every serious swimming program. She was here to swim. Maya pulled her goggles down over her eyes and adjusted the strap with practiced efficiency. The familiar pressure around her eye sockets was comforting, like putting on armor before battle. She had been through 12 pairs of goggles in the past 2 years, each one worn down by countless hours of training until the seal no longer held or the strap snapped from repeated stretching. This current pair, a sleek black model with anti-fog coating, had been with her for 4 months now and was showing the first signs of wear around the edges. The water accepted her body with the smooth resistance she craved. Her first stroke was always tentative, a greeting between old friends who hadn't seen each other in several hours. By the third stroke, her muscle memory had engaged completely, and she settled into the rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. Her technique was unorthodox by conventional standards, developed through years of self-coaching and intuitive adjustments rather than formal instruction. Where other swimmers might focus on textbook form, Maya had learned to listen to the water itself, to feel how each movement affected her relationship with the liquid environment around her. 20 laps into her warm-up, Maya noticed the shift in energy around the pool. The casual morning swimmers were giving way to the more serious athletes, and the pace of activity was increasing noticeably. Coach Harrison would arrive soon, bringing with him the structured intensity that transformed the peaceful morning session into something altogether different. Maya had mixed feelings about this transition. While she appreciated the knowledge and experience that Harrison brought to the program, she had never quite felt like she belonged in his vision of what competitive swimming should look like. The coach's arrival was always announced by the sharp blast of his whistle, a sound that seemed to reorganize the entire facility around his presence. Maya was in the middle of a particularly smooth 200-meter freestyle when she heard it, the piercing note that meant her solitary training time was over. She completed her length and pulled herself up to the pool's edge, water streaming from her body as she prepared to join the group session that was about to begin. Coach Harrison stood at the far end of the pool, clipboard in hand, his weathered face already showing the focused intensity that characterized his approach to training. He was a man in his mid-50s who had spent the better part of 3 decades developing competitive swimmers, and his reputation extended far beyond the boundaries of Coral Bay. Former Olympic contenders sought him out for training camps, and several of his swimmers had gone on to compete at the highest levels of the sport. His presence at the Aquatic Center was considered a significant asset to the community, and Maya understood why the facility's management gave him considerable latitude in how he ran his programs. The elite training group consisted of 8 swimmers, ranging in age from 16 to 24. Maya, at 22, fell somewhere in the middle of the age range, but she had always felt like an outsider within the group. Most of the others had been swimming competitively since childhood, their techniques refined through years of formal coaching and structured training. They spoke a language of splits and intervals and technique adjustments that Maya had learned to understand, but never quite felt fluent in speaking. Sarah Chun was the group's unofficial leader, a 19-year-old with perfect technique and times that had already caught the attention of college recruiters. She moved through the water with an efficiency that seemed almost mechanical, every stroke calculated to produce maximum forward motion with minimum energy expenditure. Her backstroke was particularly impressive, a smooth rotation that maintained perfect body position even at race pace. Maya had watched her train for 2 years now and still found herself marveling at the precision of Sarah's technique. Next to Sarah, Jake Morrison represented the power end of the spectrum. His freestyle generated impressive times through sheer force rather than technical perfection, his broad shoulders and long arms creating a stroke that could overwhelm less prepared competitors. Jake had been swimming competitively for 12 years and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never seriously doubted his place in the sport. He was friendly enough to Maya, but their interactions rarely extended beyond basic pleasantries about training or pool conditions. The other swimmers in the group each brought their own strengths and personalities to the dynamic. Emma Rodriguez was a butterflyer whose underwater dolphin kicks were legendary among the local swimming community. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus Thompson specialized in distance freestyle and had the kind of steady, metronomic stroke that could maintain pace for kilometers without apparent effort. Lisa Park was a sprinter whose explosive starts had won her numerous meets in the 50-meter events. David Kim rounded out the group as a versatile swimmer who could contribute to relay teams in multiple strokes. Maya had joined this group 18 months ago, not through any formal invitation, but simply by showing up consistently and demonstrating that she belonged through her performance in the water. Her times weren't the fastest in the group, but they were respectable, and more importantly, they were improving steadily. She had developed her own training philosophy over the years, focusing on feel for the water rather than strict adherence to technique protocols. This approach had served her well in her individual training, but it sometimes put her at odds with Coach Harrison's more structured methodology. The morning's workout was posted on the whiteboard near the starting blocks, written in Harrison's precise handwriting. It was a challenging set focused on threshold training, designed to push the swimmer's lactate tolerance while maintaining good technique under fatigue. Maya studied the workout with the same attention she gave to everything related to her swimming. She had learned to decode Harrison's programming over the months, understanding how each set fit into the larger picture of their training cycle. The warm-up began with 800 meters of easy swimming, allowing the swimmers to settle into the rhythm of the group session. Maya found herself in lane 6, positioned between Emma and Marcus. The lane assignments weren't arbitrary. Harrison had developed a system that placed swimmers of similar speed together to minimize the disruption caused by faster swimmers catching up to slower ones. Maya's position in lane 6 reflected her status as a solid middle-of-the-pack performer within the group, capable of keeping up with the workout, but not setting the pace. As the warm-up progressed, Maya felt her body settling into the familiar rhythm of structured training. The presence of the other swimmers created a different energy than her solo sessions, a subtle competitive tension that pushed everyone to swim just a little faster than they might have alone. She had learned to appreciate this dynamic even if she never felt completely comfortable with it. The group sessions forced her to confront her own limitations in ways that solo training never could. The main set began with 4x400 meters on a tight interval, designed to simulate race conditions while building endurance. Maya had always performed well in these longer sets, her self-taught technique proving particularly effective at maintaining efficiency over distance. As she settled into the rhythm of the first 400, she felt the familiar sensation of her stroke finding its groove, the point where conscious thought gave way to muscle memory and instinct. Halfway through the second 400, Maya realized she was ahead of her usual position in the lane. Her stroke felt particularly smooth today, and she was managing to maintain a pace that would normally have been unsustainable for her over this distance. She didn't allow herself to think too much about it, knowing that overanalysis could disrupt the delicate balance she had achieved with the water. Instead, she focused on the rhythm of her breathing and the feel of her hand catching the water. With each stroke, by the third 400, it was becoming clear that Maya was having an exceptional morning. She was not only keeping up with Emma and Marcus, but actually setting a slightly faster pace than usual. The other swimmers in adjacent lanes were beginning to notice, and she could sense their awareness of her performance, even as she remained focused on her own lane. This kind of attention made her uncomfortable, but she tried to push the feeling aside and concentrate on maintaining her technique. The final 400 of the set was where the workout typically became most challenging. This was the point where good swimmers separated themselves from merely competent ones, where the accumulated fatigue of the previous distances began to affect technique and pace. Maya had struggled with this portion of similar sets in the past, her times often dropping off significantly as her body dealt with the lactate buildup in her muscles. Today felt different. As she pushed off the wall for the final 400, Maya found herself drawing on reserves of strength and endurance that she hadn't known she possessed. Her stroke remained smooth and efficient even as her heart rate climbed, and her muscles began to burn with the familiar sensation of high-intensity effort. She was no longer just keeping up with the group. She was actually pulling ahead in some sections, her unorthodox technique proving surprisingly effective under the pressure of the workout. Coach Harrison had been walking along the pool deck. During the set, his attention focused primarily on Sarah and Jake, who were typically the performance leaders within the group. But as Maya completed her final 400, she noticed his attention had shifted to her lane. He was standing at the wall, where she would finish, stopwatch in hand, his expression unreadable behind his customary sunglasses. Maya touched the wall and immediately looked up at the pace clock to check her time. What she saw made her do a double take. She had not only completed the set within the prescribed interval, but had actually swum faster than she had ever managed in a similar workout. Her final 400 was a full 3 seconds faster than her previous best effort at this distance, and more importantly, she had maintained her technique throughout the entire set. The other swimmers in her lane were equally surprised. Emma, who had been Maya's primary reference point for pacing, looked genuinely impressed as she caught her breath between the wall and the lane rope. Marcus, typically reserved in his interactions with other swimmers, offered a brief nod of acknowledgement that felt more meaningful than extended praise might have from someone else. Coach Harrison approached Maya's lane as the swimmers prepared for the next portion of the workout. His expression was still difficult to read, but there was something in his posture that suggested he was reassessing his understanding of Maya's capabilities. She had been a consistent but unremarkable presence in his group for over a year, someone who worked hard and showed up regularly, but had never distinguished herself as a standout performer. "Interesting swim," Harrison said, his voice carrying the measured tone he used when he was processing new information. "What felt different today?" Maya pulled herself up to sit on the pool edge, her legs still dangling in the water. The question was more direct than most of her interactions with Harrison, who typically communicated with swimmers through workout instructions and general comments rather than individual consultations. She took a moment to consider her response, wanting to be honest without sounding like she was overthinking her performance. "I'm not sure," she said finally. "Everything just felt more connected today, like the water was working with me instead of against me." Harrison nodded slowly, making a note on his clipboard. Maya couldn't see what he was writing, but she sensed that her answer had registered with him in some way. The coach had been around competitive swimming long enough to recognize when a swimmer was describing a genuine breakthrough rather than just a lucky performance. The remainder of the workout continued with a series of sprint sets designed to maintain turnover speed while dealing with accumulated fatigue. Maya's performance in these shorter distances was less dramatically improved than her showing in the 400s, but she still managed to hold her own within the group. More importantly, she felt like she was swimming with a confidence that had been missing from her previous training sessions. As the group completed their cool-down laps, Maya found herself swimming next to Sarah, who rarely initiated conversations during training. The normally focused swimmer seemed genuinely curious about Maya's performance during the main set. "You looked really smooth out there today," Sarah said as they completed an easy 200 meters. "Have you been working on something specific?" Maya was surprised by the question. In the 18 months she had been training with the group, Sarah had never shown much interest in her training or technique. The elite swimmers typically focused on their own performance and goals, leaving Maya to work through her own challenges, without much input from the others. "Not really," Maya replied. "I've been trying to focus more on feel rather than forcing the stroke. Maybe that's starting to pay off." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "It showed. Your stroke rate was really consistent, even when you were going faster. That's usually the first thing that breaks down when people try to push the pace." The conversation was brief, but it marked a shift in how Maya felt about her place within the group. For the first time, she sensed that the other swimmers were seeing her as a legitimate part of the team rather than just someone who happened to share their training time. Coach Harrison called the group together as they finished their cool down. This was a daily ritual where he would review the workout, make announcements about upcoming competitions, and occasionally offer individual feedback to swimmers who had caught his attention. Maya typically listened politely to these sessions, without expecting to be specifically addressed. "Good work today," Harrison began, his voice carrying easily across the pool deck. "I saw some solid performances across the board. Sarah, your underwater work on the third 400 was particularly strong. Jake, watch your stroke count on the back half of those sprints. You're starting to overreach when you get tired." Maya half expected the session to end there, as Harrison's feedback typically focused on the swimmers who were competing regularly or showing specific technical issues that needed attention. But instead, his attention turned to her lane. "Maya," he said, his tone neutral but direct, "stick around for a few minutes after the others finish up. I want to talk to you about something." The request was unexpected and immediately created a knot of nervous energy in Maya's stomach. Individual consultations with Harrison were rare, and she couldn't think of anything she had done wrong during the workout. Her technique had felt good, her times were solid, and she had followed the prescribed intervals without causing any disruption to the group dynamic. As the other swimmers gathered their equipment and headed toward the locker rooms, Maya remained in the water, doing easy laps to keep her muscles loose while she waited for Harrison to finish his post-workout routine. The coach typically spent several minutes after each session updating his training log and reviewing the performance data he had collected during the workout. Finally, Harrison approached the edge of the pool where Maya was waiting. He knelt down so that they were at eye level, his expression serious but not unfriendly. This was the closest thing to a private conversation Maya had ever had with him, and she found herself paying attention to details she had never noticed before. His sunglasses were pushed up on his forehead, revealing eyes that were more tired than she had expected. The clipboard in his hands was worn from years of use, filled with training data and notes that represented hundreds of hours of pool time. "You've been training with us for what, 18 months now?" Harrison asked. "About that," Maya confirmed. "Since February of last year. And you've been swimming how long overall?" Maya paused, unsure how to answer the question. The truth was complicated in a way that didn't fit neatly into the typical swimmer's biography. She had been around water her entire life, had learned to swim as a child, but had never followed the conventional path of age group competition and formal coaching that characterized most serious swimmers. "I've been swimming my whole life," she said carefully, "but not competitively. I only started training seriously about 3 years ago." Harrison nodded, making another note on his clipboard. "What made you want to start training seriously?" The question touched on something Maya rarely discussed with anyone. Her relationship with swimming was deeply personal, tied to experiences and motivations that felt too private to share with someone she barely knew. But Harrison's question seemed genuine, and she sensed that her answer might be important for reasons she didn't fully understand. "I moved to Coral Bay after college," she said. "I was going through a difficult time, and swimming helped me find some stability. The ocean here made me want to push myself harder than I ever had before." Harrison's expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been the first genuine interest he had ever displayed in Maya as an individual rather than just another swimmer in his group. "You swim in the ocean regularly?" "Almost every day," Maya replied. "Usually in the afternoon, after pool training. I swim out to the point and back, sometimes farther if the conditions are good." "How far is that?" Maya had to think about the distance. She had never measured it precisely, but she had a rough sense of the geography based on her years of swimming the route. "About 2 miles each way. Sometimes I'll do multiple loops if I'm feeling good." Harrison was quiet for a moment, his attention focused on something beyond the pool. Maya could almost see him processing this information, fitting it into his understanding of her performance and potential. Ocean swimming was a completely different discipline than pool training, requiring different skills and presenting different challenges. The fact that Maya was regularly swimming 4 miles or more in open water suggested a level of endurance and water confidence that wasn't immediately apparent in the pool. "That's interesting," Harrison said finally. "Ocean swimming requires different skills than pool training. You have to deal with currents, temperature changes, navigation. It's not something most pool swimmers are comfortable with." Maya nodded, unsure where the conversation was heading. "I've always preferred open water. The pool is great for technique work, but the ocean feels more natural to me." "Have you ever considered competing in open water events?" Harrison asked. "There are some good regional races that might suit your background." The question caught Maya off guard. She had never thought about competitive open water swimming, mainly because she had assumed her late start in serious training had put such opportunities out of reach. Most competitive swimmers had been racing since childhood, building the kind of competitive experience and mental toughness that Maya felt she lacked. "I hadn't really thought about it," she said honestly. I assumed I was too much of a beginner for that kind of competition. Harrison's expression shifted again, this time showing what might have been surprise. Beginner? Maya, you just swam a set of 400s that would have been competitive in most regional meets. And you're doing it while training 4 miles a day in the ocean. That's not beginner-level fitness. Maya felt a flush of embarrassment at the praise. She had become so accustomed to thinking of herself as the least accomplished swimmer in the group that she had trouble processing the idea that her performance might actually be noteworthy. The time she had achieved that morning had felt good, but she had assumed they were simply the result of a particularly good day rather than any fundamental improvement in her abilities. I still have a lot to learn, she said, deflecting the compliment. My technique isn't nearly as refined as the others. Technique can be taught, Harrison replied. Feel for the water is something you either have or you don't. And you clearly have it. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the facility's maintenance staff, who needed to begin their daily cleaning routine. Harrison stood up and gathered his equipment, but he wasn't finished with their discussion. I want you to think about something, he said as Maya pulled herself out of the pool. There's a regional open water championship coming up in 6 weeks. It's a 5K race, held in conditions similar to what you're used to swimming in. I think you should consider entering. Maya's immediate reaction was to dismiss the idea. A 5K race was 1 miles longer than her typical ocean swims, and the competitive aspect introduced variables she had never dealt with before. But something in Harrison's tone suggested that this wasn't just a casual suggestion. You really think I'm ready for something like that? She asked. I think you might surprise yourself, Harrison replied. But there's only one way to find out. As Maya gathered her own equipment and headed toward the locker room, she found herself thinking about the coach's suggestion. The idea of competing in an open water race was both exciting and terrifying. She had spent the past 3 years swimming primarily for her own satisfaction, enjoying the personal challenge and the meditative qualities of long-distance swimming. Competition would add an entirely new dimension to the experience. The locker room was nearly empty by the time Maya arrived, most of the other swimmers having already changed and left for their daily activities. She appreciated the solitude, which gave her time to process the morning's events without having to engage in small talk or social pleasantries. The improvement in her performance had been unexpected, and Coach Harrison's suggestion about open water racing had introduced possibilities she had never seriously considered. Maya changed out of her wetsuit slowly, her mind still replaying the conversation with Harrison. The coach had seen something in her performance that she hadn't recognized herself, and his suggestion about open water racing felt like a door opening to opportunities she had never imagined. But the idea also triggered a familiar anxiety about her place in the competitive swimming world. She had always been an outsider in organized sports, someone who preferred individual challenges to team dynamics. Her approach to swimming had been largely self-directed, guided by instinct and personal satisfaction, rather than external validation or competitive goals. The thought of entering a formal race, with all the structure and pressure that entailed, felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. As she packed her gear into her swim bag, Maya made a mental note to research the open water championship Harrison had mentioned. She wasn't ready to commit to entering the race, but she was curious enough to learn more about what would be involved. The coach's confidence in her abilities was flattering, but she needed to understand the reality of competitive open water swimming before she could make an informed decision. The walk from the aquatic center to her car took Maya past the marina where she often began her ocean swims. The morning sun was now fully above the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and blue that made her want to dive in immediately. This was the view that had originally drawn her to Coral Bay, the endless expanse of ocean that promised both challenge and solace. Maya had discovered this particular stretch of coastline during her first week in town, when she was still adjusting. to the major life changes that had brought her to this small coastal community. The ocean had provided a sense of continuity during a period when everything else in her life felt uncertain. Her daily swims had become a form of meditation, a way to process the stresses and challenges of rebuilding her life in a new place. The technique she had developed during those early months of ocean swimming was unconventional by pool standards, but it had proven remarkably effective for dealing with the variable conditions of open water. Where pool swimmers focused on maintaining perfect form within the controlled environment of lane lines and still water, Maya had learned to adapt her stroke to work with currents, waves, and temperature changes. This adaptability had served her well during the morning's pool workout, allowing her to maintain efficiency even as her pace increased. She had learned to listen to her body and adjust her technique in real time, responding to feedback from the water rather than rigidly adhering to textbook form. It was an approach that Harrison had apparently recognized and valued, even if it differed from his typical coaching methodology. As Maya drove home from the aquatic center, she found herself thinking about the other swimmers in the group and how they might react to Harrison's suggestion about open water racing. Most of them had been focused on pool competition for years, working toward qualifying times and championship meets that represented the traditional pinnacle of competitive swimming. Open water racing was a different discipline entirely, one that valued endurance and tactical thinking over pure speed and technical perfection. The idea of competing in an arena where her strengths might actually be advantages rather than compromises was appealing. Maya had spent months feeling like an outsider in the pool training group, someone who worked hard but would never quite fit the mold of what a competitive swimmer was supposed to be. The possibility that there might be a form of competition better suited to her particular skills and background was intriguing. But the prospect of actually entering a race also brought up fears and insecurities that Maya had been avoiding. Competition meant being judged, being compared to others, potentially failing in public. She had spent the past 3 years swimming, primarily for herself, enjoying the personal satisfaction of improving her fitness and technique, without having to worry about external validation or criticism. Maya arrived home to find her small apartment filled with the kind of morning light that made her grateful for her decision to move to Coral Bay. The windows faced east toward the ocean, providing a view of the water that changed throughout the day as the light shifted and the weather evolved. She had chosen this apartment specifically for this view, knowing that being able to see the ocean from her living room would help her feel connected to the source of so much of her happiness. The apartment itself was modest, furnished with the kind of practical pieces that reflected Maya's priorities and lifestyle. The living room contained a comfortable reading chair positioned to take advantage of the ocean view, a small bookshelf filled with volumes on swimming, ocean science, and marine biology, and a simple coffee table that often held her training log and race results from other swimmers she followed online. Maya made herself a cup of coffee and settled into the reading chair, her laptop open to research the open water championship that Harrison had mentioned. The race was called the Coastal Challenge, held annually in the waters off nearby Monterey Bay. The course was a 5,000 loop that took swimmers around a series of buoys, positioned to take advantage of the area's natural currents and geography. The race description emphasized the challenging conditions that participants could expect to encounter. Water temperature would likely be in the low 60s, requiring wetsuits for most swimmers. Currents could be significant, particularly around the outer turn buoys, and participants needed to be comfortable with navigation in conditions where visibility might be limited. The race attracted swimmers from across the region, including several who had competed in national-level open water events. Maya found herself both intimidated and excited by the description. The conditions sounded similar to what she encountered during her regular ocean swims, but the competitive aspect introduced variables she had never dealt with before. Racing against other swimmers would require different tactics and mental approaches than the solitary challenges she was accustomed to. The entry requirements for the race were straightforward but serious. Participants needed to provide evidence of their ability to complete the distance safely, either through previous race results or a certified time trial. They also needed to demonstrate basic open water swimming skills, including the ability to navigate without lane lines and to deal with contact from other swimmers. Maya realized that she already met most of these requirements through her regular training, but the idea of documenting her abilities in a formal way was daunting. She had never timed her ocean swims precisely, preferring to focus on the experience rather than the performance metrics. The thought of swimming a 5,000 time trial, with all the pressure and expectations that would entail, made her stomach tighten with anxiety. But there was also something appealing about the challenge. Maya had been swimming the same routes and distances for months, and while she enjoyed the consistency, part of her was ready for something new. The race would force her to push beyond her comfort zone, to test her abilities against both the ocean and other swimmers who shared her passion for open water. As she continued reading about the race, Maya found herself imagining what it would feel like to stand on the beach with dozens of other swimmers, waiting for the starting signal. The image was both thrilling and terrifying, representing a level of commitment to competitive swimming that she had never seriously considered before. The registration deadline for the race was still several weeks away, giving Maya time to think about Harrison's suggestion and to prepare if she decided to enter. But she realized that the decision itself was less important than what it represented. For the first time since she had started training seriously, someone with experience and expertise had suggested that her abilities might be worthy of a larger stage. Maya closed the laptop and returned to looking out at the ocean, her mind still processing the events of the morning. The improvement in her pool performance had been gratifying, but Harrison's recognition of her potential felt even more significant. She had spent so many months feeling like an outsider in the swimming world that the possibility of finding a place where she truly belonged was almost overwhelming. The morning sun was now high enough to create serious glare on the water's surface, turning the ocean into a sheet of diamonds that was almost too bright to look at directly. This was the time of day when Maya usually began thinking about her afternoon ocean swim, planning her route and checking the weather conditions that would affect her training. Today, however, she found herself thinking about that swim differently. Instead of just another training session, it felt like an opportunity to test herself against the standards that Harrison had suggested she might be ready to meet. The 5K race distance was about 1 miles. Not significantly longer than her usual ocean swims, but requiring a different kind of sustained effort. Maya decided to use her afternoon swim as an informal time trial, pushing herself to see what kind of pace she could maintain over the race distance. It wouldn't be a perfect simulation of race conditions, since she would be swimming alone without the tactical considerations that came with competing against other swimmers. But it would give her a better sense of whether Harrison's suggestion about the open water championship was realistic or overly optimistic. The decision to treat her afternoon swim as a test brought up feelings Maya hadn't experienced since her college days. There was excitement about the challenge, but also anxiety about the possibility of failure. She had become comfortable with her role as a dedicated recreational swimmer, someone who worked hard and enjoyed the process without worrying too much about measurable outcomes. But Harrison's suggestion had awakened something in Maya that she hadn't realized was dormant. The possibility of competing at a higher level, of testing her abilities against other serious swimmers, appealed to a part of her that had been suppressed during her years of focusing on personal fulfillment rather than external achievement. As she prepared for her afternoon swim, Maya found herself paying attention to details that had previously been automatic. She checked the weather forecast more carefully, noting the predicted wind conditions and tide changes that would affect her swim. She selected her wetsuit with more consideration than usual, choosing the one that provided the best balance of warmth and freedom of movement. The preparation felt different when it was oriented toward a specific goal, rather than just general fitness and enjoyment. Maya realized that she had been approaching her swimming with a certain casualness that, while enjoyable, might have been limiting her development. The prospect of competitive racing was forcing her to think more systematically about her training and preparation. But even as she embraced this new level of seriousness, Maya was careful not to lose sight of what had drawn her to swimming in the first place. The ocean had been her refuge during a difficult period in her life, and she didn't want the pursuit of competitive goals to compromise the meditative and therapeutic aspects of her swimming that had been so valuable. As she walked down to the beach for her afternoon swim, Maya felt a sense of anticipation that was different from her usual pre-swim routine. Today's swim would be both a continuation of her regular training and a test of her potential for something more. The ocean stretched out before her, as it had countless times before, but today it felt like it might hold answers to questions she was only beginning to ask. The email arrived 3 days after Maya's conversation with Coach Harrison, landing in her inbox with a subject line that made her stomach drop: Coastal Challenge registration, final notice. She stared at the message for several minutes before opening it, knowing that whatever it contained would force her to make a decision she had been avoiding since their poolside discussion. The message was brief and matter-of-fact, informing her that Harrison had taken the liberty of submitting her preliminary application for the Open Water Championship. Her spot was being held pending submission of qualifying documentation, but the deadline for final registration was approaching rapidly. Maya felt a mixture of gratitude and resentment at the coach's presumption, even as she recognized that his action had pushed her past the point of endless deliberation. Maya reread the email twice, absorbing the implications of what Harrison had done. By submitting her application, he had transformed the possibility of competing from an abstract consideration into a concrete reality that demanded immediate action. She would either need to complete the registration process and commit to the race, or withdraw and explain her decision to someone who had clearly invested his professional credibility in her potential. The qualifying documentation required for the race was more extensive than Maya had initially realized. In addition to proof of her ability to complete the 5K distance safely, she needed to provide evidence of her experience with open water conditions, including navigation skills and familiarity with wetsuit swimming. The organizers also required a recent medical clearance and liability waivers that emphasized the serious nature of the competition. Maya spent the afternoon gathering the necessary paperwork, a process that forced her to confront the reality of what she was considering. The medical examination required by the race organizers was more thorough than anything she had undergone since college, focusing specifically on cardiovascular fitness and cold water tolerance. The doctor who conducted the exam was familiar with open water swimming and asked detailed questions about her training routine and experience with challenging conditions. The liability waivers were even more sobering, filled with detailed descriptions of the risks associated with open water racing. Hypothermia, exhaustion, disorientation, and contact with marine life were all presented as realistic possibilities that participants needed to acknowledge and accept. Maya had encountered most of these hazards during her regular ocean swims, but seeing them listed in legal language made them feel more immediate and serious. As she completed the paperwork, Maya found herself thinking about the swimmers she had met during her years of training at the aquatic center. Most of them had been competing in organized events since childhood, building their tolerance for pressure and their understanding of race tactics through countless meets and competitions. Maya's experience was entirely different, based on solitary training and personal challenges rather than head-to-head competition. The thought of standing on a beach with dozens of other swimmers, waiting for a starting signal, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Maya had never experienced the controlled chaos of a mass start, where swimmers fought for position while dealing with the disorientation of churning water, and physical contact with competitors. Her ocean swims had always been solitary experiences, allowing her to focus entirely on her own performance and the rhythm of her stroke. But there was also something appealing about the prospect of testing herself against other swimmers who shared her passion for open water. Maya had spent months feeling isolated within the pool training group, someone who worked hard but never quite fit the conventional mold of what a competitive swimmer should be. The Open Water Championship represented a different kind of competition, one where her strengths might actually be advantages rather than compromises. The qualifying time trial was scheduled for the following Saturday, giving Maya less than a week to prepare mentally for what would essentially be her first formal competitive event. The trial would be conducted under race conditions with official timing and safety protocols that would provide the documentation required for her registration. More importantly, it would give her a realistic assessment of whether she was actually ready for the challenges of competitive open water swimming. Maya approached the time trial with a combination of excitement and anxiety that was unfamiliar. After years of swimming primarily for personal satisfaction, she had always been someone who performed better without external pressure, preferring to challenge herself through internal motivation rather than competition with others. The prospect of being timed and evaluated introduced variables that made her question whether she was ready for this level of scrutiny. The night before the time trial, Maya found herself unable to sleep, her mind cycling through scenarios and contingencies that she had never needed to consider before. What if the water conditions were particularly challenging? What if she experienced equipment problems with her wetsuit or goggles? What if she simply had an off day and failed to demonstrate the abilities that had convinced Harrison she was ready for competition? She got up before dawn and made her way to the beach where the time trial would be conducted. The early morning light was just beginning to reveal the ocean's surface, which looked deceptively calm in the stillness before sunrise. Maya knew from experience that conditions could change rapidly, and she spent several minutes studying the water for signs of current patterns and wave action that would affect her swim. The time trial was being administered by a certified open water swimming official who had driven down from San Francisco specifically for this assessment. Maya was grateful for the professional approach, even as it added to the pressure she was feeling. This wasn't just a casual evaluation by a local coach. It was a formal test that would determine whether she was qualified to compete at the regional level. The official, a woman named Patricia, who had been involved in open water swimming for over 2 decades, walked Maya through the procedures and safety protocols that would govern the trial. The course was a simple out-and-back route that would total exactly 5 kilometers, marked by buoys that Maya would need to navigate around without assistance. She would be accompanied by a safety kayaker, but the kayaker's role was purely observational unless an emergency arose. Maya felt her nervousness increase as Patricia explained the timing procedures and performance standards that would determine whether her trial was successful. She needed to complete the distance in under 2 hours to meet the basic qualification requirements. But more importantly, she needed to demonstrate consistent pace and technique throughout the swim. The evaluator would be looking for evidence that Maya could maintain her performance under the kind of sustained effort required for competitive racing. As Maya prepared to enter the water, she tried to focus on the skills and instincts that had served her well during thousands of training swims. The ocean was a familiar environment, and she had covered similar distances countless times without difficulty. The only difference was that today her performance would be measured and evaluated, transformed from a personal challenge into a formal assessment of her abilities. The starting signal was a simple blast from an air horn, but the sound seemed to echo across the water with unusual intensity. Maya entered the ocean with the same deliberate approach she used for her regular swims, allowing her body to adjust to the water temperature and her mind to settle into the rhythm that had become second nature over the past 3 years. The first kilometer of the time trial felt surprisingly comfortable, despite the added pressure of being evaluated. Maya found herself swimming at a pace that was slightly faster than her usual training rhythm, driven by the adrenaline of competition and the desire to demonstrate her capabilities. Her stroke felt smooth and efficient, and she was maintaining good navigation relative to the course markers. But as she approached the turnaround point at the halfway mark, Maya began to feel the effects of the increased pace she had been maintaining. The excitement and nervousness of the trial had caused her to start faster than she typically would for a distance of this length, and she was beginning to pay the price in terms of accumulated fatigue. Her stroke was still technically sound, but it required more conscious effort to maintain the efficiency that had been automatic during the early stages of the swim. The turnaround buoy marked the beginning of the return leg, and Maya used the brief navigation break to assess her condition and adjust her strategy for the remaining distance. She was still well within her capabilities, but she needed to be more disciplined about her pacing to ensure that she could maintain her performance. Through the final kilometers, the return leg of the time trial proved to be more challenging than Maya had anticipated. The wind had picked up slightly, creating a chop that made her stroke less efficient and required more energy to maintain her pace. More significantly, the psychological pressure of the trial was beginning to affect her in ways that were unfamiliar after years of swimming primarily for personal enjoyment. Maya found herself thinking about the consequences of failure, about what it would mean to Harrison and to her own self-image if she was unable to complete the trial successfully. These thoughts were distracting and counterproductive, pulling her attention away from the technical focus that was essential for efficient swimming. She had to consciously redirect her mental energy toward the immediate tasks of navigation and stroke technique. The third kilometer was where Maya's experience with long-distance ocean swimming began to pay dividends. While the conditions and the pressure of evaluation were challenging, the distance itself was well within her established capabilities. Her body settled into the steady rhythm that had carried her through countless training swims, and she was able to maintain a consistent pace despite the accumulating fatigue. The safety kayaker who had been accompanying Maya throughout the trial moved closer during this portion of the swim, not because of any immediate concern, but as a precautionary measure during the most demanding part of the course. Maya was aware of the kayaker's presence but tried not to let it affect her focus, understanding that the observer was simply following established safety protocols. As Maya entered the final 2 kilometers of the time trial, she felt a familiar sense of determination that had sustained her through many challenging ocean swims. The finish line was still distant, but she could visualize the completion of the course and the satisfaction that would come with demonstrating her readiness for competitive racing. Her stroke remained steady and efficient, even as her muscles began to show the effects of the sustained effort. The 4th kilometer brought with it the kind of mental and physical challenges that Maya had learned to navigate during her years of ocean swimming. The repetitive nature of the stroke, combined with the monotony of the open water environment, created a meditative state that allowed her to maintain her pace without conscious effort. This was the zone where Maya felt most comfortable, where her swimming became an almost automatic response to the rhythm of the water. Patricia, the race official, had been tracking Maya's progress from the beach using binoculars and timing equipment. As Maya approached the final kilometer, Patricia could see that the swimmer was maintaining good form and consistent pace, indicating that she was likely to complete the trial successfully. The official had evaluated dozens of swimmers over the years and had developed an eye for identifying those who possessed the mental and physical attributes necessary for competitive open water racing. The final kilometer of the time trial was where Maya's months of disciplined training became most apparent. While many swimmers would have begun to struggle with technique and pacing at this point, Maya actually appeared to be getting stronger as she approached the finish. Her stroke rate remained consistent, and her navigation was precise, indicating that she was maintaining good focus despite the accumulated fatigue of the distance. Maya could see the finish line markers as she entered the final few hundred meters of the trial, and she felt a surge of excitement that she had to consciously control to avoid disrupting her technique. The temptation to sprint to the finish was strong, but she knew that maintaining her established pace was more important than achieving a marginally faster time. The trial was about demonstrating consistency and competence, not about setting records. The moment Maya touched the finish line marker, she felt a combination of relief and exhilaration that was unlike anything she had experienced during her regular training swims. The completion of the time trial represented not just the successful completion of a specific distance, but the achievement of a qualification that would allow her to compete at a level she had never seriously considered before. Patricia was waiting at the finish line with her timing equipment and evaluation forms, ready to provide Maya with the official results of her trial. The swim had been completed in a time that was well within the qualification standards, but more importantly, Maya had demonstrated the kind of consistent performance and technical competence that indicated she was ready for competitive racing. The official results showed that Maya had completed the 5K distance in 1 hour and 23 minutes, a time that placed her in the middle range of competitive open water swimmers. More significantly, her split time showed that she had maintained remarkably consistent pacing throughout the swim, with only minor variations that could be attributed to changing water conditions rather than fitness or technique problems. Patricia's evaluation was overwhelmingly positive, noting Maya's excellent navigation skills, consistent technique, and apparent comfort with the physical and mental demands of distance swimming. The official mentioned that Maya's performance suggested she had significant potential for improvement with more focused training and competitive experience. As Maya processed the results of her time trial, she felt a complex mix of emotions that reflected the significance of what she had just accomplished. The successful completion of the trial meant that she was now qualified to compete in the Coastal Challenge, transforming her from a recreational swimmer into someone who could legitimately consider herself a competitive athlete. But the trial had also revealed aspects of competitive swimming that were both appealing and concerning. The pressure of being evaluated had affected her performance in ways that were unfamiliar after years of swimming, primarily for personal satisfaction. Maya realized that competitive racing would require mental skills and tactical awareness that were different from the mindset that had served her well during her solitary training. The drive home from the time trial gave Maya time to reflect on the implications of her successful qualification. She was now committed to competing in the Coastal Challenge, a decision that would require significant changes to her training routine and mental approach to swimming. The race was only 5 weeks away, giving her limited time to prepare for the specific challenges of competitive open water racing. Maya spent the evening researching competitive open water swimming tactics and strategies, areas where her experience was limited, despite her strong foundation in distance swimming. She learned about the importance of positioning during mass starts, the tactics involved in navigating around turn buoys, and the mental strategies that successful open water racers use to maintain focus and performance under pressure. The technical aspects of competitive racing were fascinating, but also somewhat intimidating. Maya realized that her years of solitary ocean swimming had given her excellent fitness and water skills, but had not prepared her for the tactical and psychological dimensions of racing against other swimmers. She would need to develop new skills and strategies in a relatively short period of time. Maya's research also revealed the caliber of competition she could expect to face at the Coastal Challenge. The race attracted serious open water swimmers from throughout the region, including several who had competed at national and international levels. While Maya's qualifying time indicated that she belonged in the field, she would clearly be racing against athletes with significantly more competitive experience. The following Monday, Maya returned to pool training with a new sense of purpose and urgency. Her successful time trial had validated Harrison's assessment of her potential, but it had also revealed the work that remained to be done before she would be truly ready for competitive racing. She needed to develop race-specific skills while maintaining the endurance and technique that had gotten her to this point. Coach Harrison was waiting for Maya when she arrived at the aquatic center, his expression showing a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation that suggested he had already heard about her successful qualification. The coach had been involved in competitive swimming long enough to understand the significance of Maya's achievement, particularly given her unconventional background and relatively recent entry into serious training. Harrison's approach to Maya's training underwent a subtle but significant shift following her time trial. Where he had previously treated her as a dedicated recreational swimmer who happened to train with the competitive group, he now began to work with her as an athlete preparing for a specific competitive goal. The change was reflected in the individual attention he gave to her technique and tactics, as well as the way he integrated her training into the overall group dynamic. The other swimmers in the training group had mixed reactions to Maya's qualification for the Coastal Challenge. Some, like Sarah, were genuinely supportive and curious about her preparation for a type of competition that was unfamiliar to most pool swimmers. Others seemed surprised that someone who had been a peripheral member of the group had achieved something that none of them had attempted. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being both a novice competitor and an experienced open water swimmer. While she had much to learn about racing tactics and competitive strategy, her years of ocean swimming had given her skills and confidence that were valuable in the open water environment. This combination of experience and inexperience created a unique dynamic within the training group. The modified training program that Harrison developed for Maya focused on race-specific skills while maintaining the endurance base that was her primary strength. The workouts included more emphasis on pace changes and tactical positioning, skills that would be essential during the mass start and crowded conditions of competitive racing. Maya found these sessions challenging but also exciting, as they introduced elements of training that were entirely new to her experience. One of the most significant aspects of Maya's preparation was learning to swim effectively in close proximity to other swimmers. Her years of solitary ocean swimming had given her excellent navigation and pacing skills, but had not prepared her for the physical contact and tactical considerations that were part of competitive racing. Harrison arranged for several group training sessions that simulated race conditions, allowing Maya to practice swimming in crowded water while maintaining her technique and strategic awareness. These simulation sessions were initially uncomfortable for Maya, who was accustomed to the solitude and personal space of her regular ocean swims. Swimming in close quarters with other athletes required constant awareness of position and movement, skills that had to be developed through practice and repetition. Maya found herself making mistakes and experiencing moments of disorientation that were frustrating but also educational. The tactical aspects of open water racing proved to be more complex than Maya had initially realized. Successful competitors needed to balance the energy conservation of drafting behind other swimmers with the strategic advantages of maintaining good position relative to turn buoys and finish lines. These considerations required a level of tactical thinking that was entirely different from the intuitive, rhythm-based approach that had served Maya well during her individual training. As Maya's preparation for the Coastal Challenge progressed, she began to appreciate the depth of knowledge and skill that characterized competitive open water swimming. While her fitness and water skills provided a solid foundation, there were numerous technical and tactical elements that could only be developed through focused training and competitive experience. The race would be as much a learning experience as a test of her current abilities. The intensity of Maya's preparation also began to affect other aspects of her life. The increased training volume and the mental energy required for race preparation left her feeling more tired than usual, requiring adjustments to her work schedule and social activities. Maya found herself thinking about the race constantly, analyzing her preparation and imagining various scenarios that might unfold during the competition. 3 weeks before the Coastal Challenge, Maya participated in a smaller open water race that Harrison had recommended as preparation for the main event. The race was a 2K event held in similar conditions to what she could expect at the championship, providing an opportunity to test her race tactics and competitive readiness in a less pressured environment. The smaller race proved to be an invaluable learning experience for Maya, revealing both strengths and weaknesses in her preparation. Her fitness and technical skills were clearly competitive, but she made several tactical errors that cost her time and position. Most significantly, she had difficulty maintaining optimal position during the mass start, finding herself caught in the middle of the pack rather than establishing the clear water that would have allowed her to swim at her natural pace. Despite the tactical challenges, Maya finished the 2K race in a respectable time and felt confident about her ability to handle the physical demands of competitive racing. The experience had been exhilarating rather than overwhelming, confirming that she was ready for the step up to the longer distance and more competitive field of the Coastal Challenge. Harrison's feedback following the 2K race was constructive and encouraging, focusing on specific tactical improvements that Maya could make before the championship. The coach emphasized the importance of positioning during the start and around turn buoys, areas where Maya's inexperience had been most apparent. He also noted that Maya's strongest asset was her ability to maintain consistent pace over long distances, a skill that would become more valuable as races progressed and other swimmers began to fade. The final 2 weeks of preparation took on a different character as Maya shifted from building fitness to maintaining her conditioning while refining race-specific skills. The training volume decreased slightly, but the intensity and focus increased as she worked on the tactical elements that would be crucial during the championship. Maya found herself visualizing the race repeatedly, mentally rehearsing different scenarios and her responses to various competitive situations. As the date of the Coastal Challenge approached, Maya experienced a mixture of excitement and anxiety that was both familiar and entirely new. The nervousness was similar to what she had felt before her time trial, but it was magnified by the significance of the event and the level of competition she would be facing. At the same time, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the progress she had made and the opportunity to test herself against other serious open water swimmers. The week before the race, Maya made her final preparations, checking and rechecking her equipment while mentally reviewing the tactical lessons she had learned during her preparation. Her wetsuit had been thoroughly tested and fitted, her goggles were properly adjusted, and she had developed contingency plans for various equipment problems that might arise during the race. Maya also spent time studying the race course and conditions, analyzing weather forecasts and current patterns that would affect the competition. The Coastal Challenge was known for its challenging conditions, and Maya wanted to be as prepared as possible for whatever the ocean might present on race day. Her years of experience with variable ocean conditions would be an advantage, but she knew that racing in those conditions would be different from training in them. The night before the race, Maya found herself surprisingly calm despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. Her preparation had been thorough and systematic, and she felt as ready as she could be for her first major competitive event. The months of focused training had not only improved her fitness and technique, but had also given her confidence in her ability to handle the challenges of competitive open water swimming. As Maya packed her race equipment and prepared for the early morning drive to the race site, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she had been a dedicated recreational swimmer who trained with a competitive group, but never seriously considered racing. Now, She was about to compete in a regional championship against some of the best open water swimmers in the area. The transformation had been gradual but profound, affecting not just her swimming, but her entire approach to personal challenge and achievement. Maya realized that competitive racing represented a new chapter in her relationship with swimming, one that would test her in ways that went beyond the physical and technical skills she had developed during her years of solitary training. The alarm that would wake her for race day was set for 5:30 a.m., giving her time to eat properly and arrive at the race site with adequate time for final preparations. Maya had visualized this morning dozens of times during her training, and she felt confident about her routine and readiness. Tomorrow would reveal whether her preparation had been sufficient, and whether she was truly ready to compete at the level that Coach Harrison had believed was within her reach. The morning fog hung thick over Monterey Bay when Maya arrived at the race site, transforming the familiar coastal landscape into something mysterious and foreboding. She could hear the ocean before she could see it, the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocky shoreline, creating a soundtrack that was both soothing and ominous. The parking area was already crowded with vehicles bearing license plates from across California, testament to the regional significance of the coastal challenge. Maya gathered her equipment bag and walked toward the registration tent, her footsteps muffled by the damp sand. The pre-race atmosphere was unlike anything she had experienced before, a mixture of nervous energy and focused preparation that seemed to electrify the air around her. Serious-looking athletes moved with purposeful efficiency, checking equipment and studying course maps with the kind of intense concentration that spoke of years of competitive experience. The registration process was streamlined but thorough, with race officials checking Maya's qualification documentation and providing her with timing chips and safety equipment. She received her race number, 127, printed on waterproof adhesive. That would be attached to her shoulders and swim cap. The mundane administrative details helped calm her nerves, providing a sense of routine and normalcy amid the unfamiliar environment of competitive racing. Maya found a quiet spot on the beach to organize her equipment and begin her pre-race routine. The ritual of laying out her wetsuit, checking her goggles, and applying sunscreen was familiar and comforting, even in these new circumstances. She had practiced this routine dozens of times during her preparation, understanding that having a systematic approach to race day logistics would help her maintain focus when the pressure increased. The race briefing was conducted by the head official, a weathered man whose calm authority suggested decades of experience with open water events. He explained the course layout, safety procedures, and rules that would govern the competition. Maya listened intently, taking mental notes about turn buoy procedures and drafting regulations that would be crucial once the race began. The course itself was a challenging 5,000 loop that would take swimmers away from the protected waters near the beach and into the more exposed areas of the bay. The route included 4 turn buoys, each presenting different tactical challenges based on current patterns and the likely behavior of the swimming pack. Maya studied the course diagram carefully, comparing it to her mental map of the bay based on her training swims in similar waters. Weather conditions were marginal but acceptable, with water temperature measuring 62 degrees Fahrenheit and moderate wind creating a light chop on the surface. The fog was expected to lift partially during the race, but visibility would remain limited, making navigation skills crucial for maintaining optimal position relative to the course markers. As Maya prepared to put on her wetsuit, she noticed Coach Harrison approaching through the crowd of athletes and spectators. His presence was reassuring, even though she knew that once the race started, she would be entirely on her own. Harrison had driven up from Coral Bay specifically to watch her compete, a gesture that spoke to his investment in her development as a swimmer. Harrison's pre-race advice was brief but focused, emphasizing the tactical points they had discussed during training. He reminded Maya to stay relaxed during the mass start, to focus on finding clear water rather than fighting for position, and to trust her endurance advantage during the later stages of the race. Most importantly, he encouraged her to swim her own race rather than getting caught up in the tactical games that more experienced competitors might employ. The other athletes Maya observed during her preparation represented a wide range of ages and competitive backgrounds. Some were clearly elite swimmers whose technique and equipment suggested years of serious training. Others appeared to be accomplished recreational athletes who, like Maya, were testing themselves in competitive waters for the first time. The diversity of the field was both comforting and intimidating, suggesting that while the competition would be serious, it would also be accessible to swimmers with different levels of experience. Maya's wetsuit fitting routine was something she had practiced extensively during her preparation. The neoprene needed to be snug but not restrictive, allowing for full range of motion while providing thermal protection during the extended time. In cold water, she took her time with the process, knowing that equipment problems during the race could be both physically and mentally disruptive. The warm-up swim was Maya's first opportunity to feel the actual race conditions, and she was pleased to find that the water felt familiar despite the competitive environment. The temperature was only slightly colder than what she regularly experienced during her ocean training, and the wave action was well within her comfort zone. More importantly, the pre-race swim allowed her to test her equipment and settle her nerves before the main event. During the warm-up, Maya observed the other swimmers and began to get a sense of the competitive dynamics that would play out during the race. Some athletes were clearly focused on winning, their warm-up swims characterized by intense bursts of speed and aggressive positioning. Others seemed more concerned with completing the distance successfully, their preparation emphasizing technique and pacing rather than competitive tactics. Maya positioned herself somewhere in the middle of these approaches, swimming with enough intensity to prepare her body for racing, but not so aggressively as to waste energy on pre-race positioning. She had learned during her preparation that open water racing required careful energy management, and she was determined not to make the mistake of peaking too early in the competitive process. The final minutes before the race start were marked by a palpable increase in tension as athletes gathered near the starting line. Maya found herself in the middle of a crowd of wetsuit-clad swimmers, each focused on their own pre-race rituals and mental preparation. The sound of nervous chatter mixed with the splash of last-minute practice strokes created an audio landscape that was both exciting and overwhelming. Maya's starting position was deliberately conservative, positioned toward the back of the pack where she would be less likely to get caught in the aggressive positioning that characterized the front of the field. Coach Harrison had emphasized that her goal for this first competitive race should be to finish strong rather than to fight for optimal position during the chaotic early stages. The starting signal was a sharp blast from an air horn that seemed to cut through the morning fog with startling clarity. Maya's entry into the water was smooth and controlled, even as the swimmers around her began the frantic scramble for position that characterized mass starts in open water racing. She focused on finding clear water and establishing her rhythm rather than immediately attempting to move up through the field. The first few hundred meters of the race were exactly as chaotic as Maya had been warned to expect. Swimmers collided and jockeyed for position, creating a washing machine effect that made efficient swimming nearly impossible. Maya was bumped and splashed repeatedly, but she maintained her composure and continued to focus on establishing her stroke rhythm amid the confusion. As the field began to spread out after the initial positioning battles, Maya found herself in a comfortable position roughly in the middle of the pack. She was swimming in clear water with good visibility of the first turn buoy, exactly where she had hoped to be at this stage of the race. More importantly, she felt strong and relaxed, suggesting that her conservative start had been successful in preserving her energy for the longer race ahead. The approach to the first turn buoy revealed the tactical complexity that Maya had studied, but never experienced firsthand. Swimmers bunched together as they navigated around the marker, creating opportunities for those willing to take risks while penalizing athletes who were too conservative in their positioning. Maya managed to maintain her position without getting caught in the worst of the congestion, but she realized that her tactical skills would need significant development if she wanted to compete effectively at this level. The second leg of the course took the swimmers away from the protected waters near the beach and into the more exposed areas of the bay. Maya felt the difference immediately as the wave action increased and the water temperature dropped slightly. These were conditions that favored her extensive open water experience, and she began to feel more comfortable as her natural skills became more relevant to the competitive situation. Maya's stroke efficiency remained remarkably consistent as the race progressed, a testament to the months of distance training that had prepared her for this challenge. While some of the swimmers around her were beginning to show signs of fatigue, Maya felt like she was just settling into her optimal racing rhythm. The endurance base that Coach Harrison had identified as her primary strength was beginning to manifest itself as a competitive advantage. The middle section of the race was where Maya's preparation and natural abilities began to distinguish her from many of the other competitors. Her years of swimming in variable ocean conditions had taught her to adapt her technique to changing water conditions, skills that were proving valuable as the race course took swimmers through different thermal layers and current patterns. Maya began to notice that she was gradually moving up through the field, not through aggressive tactical moves, but simply by maintaining her pace while other swimmers began to fade. This was exactly the race strategy that Coach Harrison had recommended, and Maya felt a growing sense of confidence as she realized that her preparation had been appropriate for the challenges she was facing. The third turn buoy marked the beginning of the race's most challenging section, where the course turned back toward shore but took swimmers through an area known for unpredictable currents and wave patterns. Maya had studied this section extensively. During her preparation, understanding that navigation skills and tactical awareness would be crucial for maintaining good position. As Maya approached the turn buoy, she found herself swimming alongside competitors who had been well ahead of her during the early stages of the race. Some of these swimmers were clearly struggling with the accumulated fatigue of the distance, their stroke technique deteriorating as they fought to maintain pace. Maya realized that her conservative early pace was allowing her to remain strong during the portion of the race where others were beginning to suffer. The navigation challenge presented by the variable currents in this section of the course was something Maya handled with confidence based on her extensive open water experience. While some competitors struggled to maintain optimal position relative to the turn buoys, Maya was able to read the water conditions and adjust her course accordingly. This skill, developed through years of solo ocean swimming, was proving to be a significant competitive advantage. Maya's position in the field continued to improve as the race entered its final phases. She was now swimming with a group of athletes who had been among the leaders throughout the race, but she was feeling significantly stronger than most of them. The months of high-volume training were paying dividends as the race reached the point where fitness and mental toughness became the determining factors. The final turn buoy marked the beginning of the race's concluding section, a straight swim back toward the beach that would test the remaining swimmers' ability to maintain pace under fatigue. Maya felt a surge of excitement as she realized that she was in position to achieve a result that would exceed even her most optimistic pre-race expectations. As the finish line came into view, Maya found herself in a position she had never imagined possible when she started the race. She was swimming in a small group of competitors who were contending for positions well up in the overall standings. More importantly, she felt strong enough to consider attempting to improve her position during the final sprint to the finish. The final few hundred meters of the race were where Maya's months of preparation and natural racing instincts came together most effectively. She was able to increase her pace significantly without compromising her technique, a skill that had been developed through countless training sessions, but was being tested under competitive conditions for the first time. Maya's finish was strong and controlled, touching the timing mat with a sense of accomplishment that was both satisfying and surprising. She had not only completed her first competitive open water race successfully, but had achieved a result that established her as a legitimate competitor at the regional level. The months of preparation and the leap of faith required to enter the race had been validated by a performance that exceeded her expectations. As Maya exited the water and made her way to the timing area, she was greeted by Coach Harrison, whose expression showed a mixture of pride and vindication. The coach had believed in Maya's potential when she had doubted herself, and her race performance had proven that his assessment had been accurate. The result was particularly meaningful because it had been achieved through Maya's own effort and preparation rather than through any shortcuts or compromises. The official results, when they were posted, showed that Maya had finished in the top quarter of a competitive field, a result that was remarkable for someone competing in her first open water race. More importantly, her time was fast enough to qualify her for several higher-level competitions, opening doors to racing opportunities that had been unimaginable just months earlier. Maya's post-race analysis of her performance was thorough and honest, recognizing both the strengths she had displayed and the areas where improvement was needed. Her endurance and water skills had been competitive with swimmers who had years more experience, but her tactical awareness and race positioning skills clearly needed development. The race had been both a successful conclusion to her preparation and a learning experience that would inform her future training. The weeks following Maya's breakthrough performance at the Coastal Challenge brought changes that rippled through every aspect of her swimming life. The results had been posted online within hours of the race, and word of her impressive debut spread quickly through the regional open water swimming community. Maya found herself receiving congratulatory messages from swimmers she had never met, coaches from other programs, and even race directors who were interested in having her compete in their events. The transformation in how people perceived Maya was most evident when she returned to training at the Coral Bay Aquatic Center, where once she had been treated as a dedicated recreational swimmer who happened to train with the competitive group. She was now recognized as someone with legitimate racing credentials and potential for further development. The change was subtle, but unmistakable in the way conversations flowed around her and the attention paid to her training. Coach Harrison's approach to working with Maya evolved significantly after her race performance. He began incorporating more race-specific training into her routine, focusing on tactical skills and competitive strategies that would be essential for her continued development. The coach also started discussing longer-term goals and opportunities, suggesting that Maya's success at the regional level might be just the beginning of her competitive journey. Sarah Chun, the group's former unofficial leader, was among the first to acknowledge Maya's achievement directly. During a recovery swim session, she approached Maya with genuine curiosity about her race experience and the specific skills that had made her successful in open water conditions. The conversation marked a fundamental shift in their relationship, from polite coexistence to mutual respect between competitive equals. The other members of the training group showed varying degrees of interest and support for Maya's racing success. Some were genuinely excited about her achievement and eager to learn from her experience. Others seemed surprised that someone they had known primarily as a background member of the group had achieved something that none of them had attempted. The dynamics created new energy within the group, with Maya's success serving as both inspiration and challenge for the other swimmers. Maya's relationship with her own swimming underwent a profound transformation in the aftermath of her race. The solitary ocean swims that had once been her primary source of satisfaction and challenge now felt like preparation for something larger. She found herself analyzing her technique and pacing with an eye toward competitive application, viewing her training through the lens of performance optimization rather than pure personal enjoyment. The technical feedback Maya received from race officials and experienced competitors proved invaluable for her continued development. Her stroke efficiency and endurance had been impressive, but several observers noted areas where tactical improvements could yield significant performance gains. Maya embraced this feedback eagerly, understanding that her natural abilities would need to be refined through systematic training if she wanted to compete effectively at higher levels. 3 weeks after the Coastal Challenge, Maya received an unexpected phone call from a coach at a prominent swimming club in San Francisco. The coach had been following the regional open water results and was interested in discussing training opportunities that might be available to Maya. The conversation was exploratory rather than a formal offer, but it represented the kind of opportunity that Maya had never imagined possible. The possibility of training with a more specialized program was both exciting and daunting for Maya. The San Francisco club had produced several national-level open water swimmers and had resources and expertise that far exceeded what was available in Coral Bay. At the same time, Maya had built her swimming life around the community and environment that had supported her development thus far. Maya's daily routine began to incorporate elements that reflected her new status as a competitive swimmer. She started keeping a detailed training log, tracking not just distance and time but also technical notes and tactical observations that would inform her preparation for future races. The systematic approach to improvement was different from the intuitive, feel-based training that had characterized her early development. The mental aspects of competitive swimming proved to be as challenging as the physical preparation. Maya found herself dealing with expectations and pressure that were entirely new to her experience. The success at the Coastal Challenge had established her as someone with potential, but it had also created expectations for continued improvement and competitive success that she was still learning to manage. Maya's approach to her regular ocean swims evolved to include more race-specific preparation. She began practicing navigation skills, working on tactical positioning relative to imaginary competitors, and developing the mental focus required for sustained competitive effort. The ocean that had once been her refuge was now also her training ground for competitive challenges. The equipment and technical aspects of competitive swimming became more important as Maya's involvement deepened. She invested in more sophisticated timing equipment, upgraded her wetsuit to meet the specifications required for higher-level competition, and began working with a sports nutritionist to optimize her fueling strategy for long-distance events. Maya's success began to attract attention from sponsors and equipment manufacturers who were interested in supporting her development. While the offers were modest compared to what elite swimmers might receive, they represented a tangible recognition of her potential and a source of support for her continued competitive involvement. The social aspects of competitive swimming introduced Maya to a community she had never known existed. She began attending swimmer meets, following online forums dedicated to open water racing, and developing relationships with other athletes who shared her passion for the sport. The connections provided both technical knowledge and emotional support that enhanced her training experience. Maya's story began to be shared within the swimming community as an example of how non-traditional paths could lead to competitive success. Her background as a self-taught ocean swimmer who had found her way to competitive racing inspired other adult-onset swimmers who had previously assumed that serious competition was only for those who had started young. The regional swimming press took notice of Maya's achievement, with several publications featuring stories about her unconventional journey to competitive success. The coverage was generally positive and helped establish Maya as a recognizable figure within the open water swimming community. More importantly, the attention brought her to the notice of race directors and coaches who might provide opportunities for continued development. Maya's relationship with Coach Harrison deepened as they worked together on her continued development. The coach's initial assessment of her potential had been validated by her race performance, and he was now invested in helping her achieve whatever level of success her abilities would support. Their collaboration became more focused and systematic, with clear goals and structured progression toward higher levels of competition. The Coral Bay Aquatic Center began to take pride in Maya's success, recognizing that her achievement reflected well on their facility and programs. The management made her racing equipment and training schedule a priority, understanding that her continued success would benefit the entire swimming community. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being both a participant in and an ambassador for the local swimming program. Maya's work life required adjustment to accommodate her increased training volume and competitive commitments. Her employer was supportive of her athletic pursuits, allowing flexible scheduling that enabled her to attend races and training camps. The balance between professional responsibilities and athletic goals became a constant consideration in her daily planning. The financial aspects of competitive swimming presented new challenges for Maya. While she was not pursuing swimming as a profession, the costs associated with travel, equipment, and coaching were significant. Maya began to budget more carefully and seek out sponsorship opportunities that would help support her competitive goals without compromising her financial stability. Maya's preparation for her next competitive opportunity began almost immediately after the Coastal Challenge. She had proven to herself and others that she could compete successfully at the regional level, but she understood that continued improvement would require even more focused and systematic training. The next race on her calendar was a longer distance event that would present different challenges and opportunities. The technical skills that Maya needed to develop for higher-level competition became the focus of her training sessions. She worked on starts, turns, and tactical positioning with the same intensity she had once reserved for endurance training. The detailed, systematic approach to skill development was different from her earlier intuitive training style but proved to be essential for competitive success. Maya's confidence in her abilities continued to grow as she trained with the knowledge that she had already achieved competitive success. The psychological boost from her race performance carried over into her daily training, allowing her to push harder and take more risks in her preparation. The positive feedback loop between success and confidence became a driving force in her continued development. The mentorship opportunities that emerged from Maya's success allowed her to give back to the swimming community that had supported her development. She began working with newer swimmers who were interested in open water racing, sharing the knowledge and experience she had gained through her own journey. The teaching role provided perspective on her own development and reinforced her commitment to continued improvement. Maya's story became a source of inspiration for other adult swimmers who had assumed that competitive success was beyond their reach. Her example demonstrated that with dedication, proper preparation, and the right opportunities, swimmers could achieve significant goals regardless of when they began serious training. The broader impact of her success extended beyond her own competitive achievements. The systematic approach to training and competition that Maya had developed became a model for other swimmers in similar situations. Her methods for transitioning from recreational to competitive swimming, her race preparation strategies, and her approach to skill development provided a template that others could adapt to their own circumstances. Maya's relationship with the ocean that had been central to her swimming development remained strong even as her focus shifted toward competitive goals. She continued to find solace and challenge in her daily swims, understanding that the foundation of her success would always be the deep connection with the water that had sustained her through difficult times and launched her toward unexpected achievements. The future held possibilities that Maya had never imagined when she first began swimming seriously in the waters off Coral Bay. Her success had opened doors to opportunities at higher levels of competition, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that with dedication and proper preparation, even unconventional paths could lead to meaningful achievement. The journey from recreational swimmer to competitive athlete had been challenging but ultimately rewarding, providing Maya with both personal satisfaction and a platform for continued growth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.